go.
Hello, it's your favorite time of the week. Welcome back to Mastering Thought with Dr. Mark Waller and Christina Black. We talk about mind, marriage, and mental health. And today we're talking about dun, 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 exposing the secret to your monkey mind. I couldn't help myself. Anyway, Mark,
I'm not sure if we're going to get clicks from that or thumbs down.
follow your heart. If you need a thumbs down it, I get it. But we all know that you really want to like and subscribe, and we want you to too. So let's just get over with it. Like, let's just move on. Just kidding.
Oh
But
my
Mark,
God.
I do want to know, why did you pick that title, and what do you mean by monkey mind?
Very interesting. So the monkey mind, there we go with the title again.
Mm-hmm.
The monkey mind is a Buddhist term, and
Mm,
I hope my letters are big enough.
I can
So
see it.
okay, so in
Maybe not on the
Buddhism,
phone.
yeah, well, I suppose if you're on a phone, I can't do stuff on my phone at my age. I can't see anything.
Yeah.
So in Buddhism, the concept of the monkey mind refers to the restless, unsettled, and uncontrolled nature of our thoughts and mental processes.
Mm,
And as a therapist, I can tell you beyond that even, because that sounds kind of mundane. We all have this, kind of mess going on in our heads. But people who come in with relationship problems, with anxiety, depression, stress, it's all related to this constant chatter that goes on in their head. And they will
mm-hmm.
admit it readily.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So the metaphor vividly describes the mind's tendency to jump from one thought to another, much like a monkey swinging from branch to branch in a forest.
Okay, that makes sense because I can see how, people will call it a train of thought, maybe, but it's like when their mind's going on its own. Is that what you mean?
Well, no, it is that, but it's also when it just keeps jumping tracks
Yeah,
from one thing to another.
yeah,
And the strange thing is, most people don't even know this is going on inside of them. They become so used to it.
right, right. Well, and as someone with ADHD, like I have no problem seeing it,
Right.
but like someone that I know just started taking ADHD medication and started experiencing a calm mind for the first time. And he was like, this is what other like normal functioning people have done. I had no idea. And so it's pretty cool.
All right. So, what are the characteristics of the monkey mind? Relentless and restlessness. I'm sorry, and
Restlessness.
and distraction.
Mm-hmm.
Incessant chatter. And what a
Mm-hmm.
lot of people can't relate is the chatter in their heads. In the English world, it's an English dialogue going on in your head.
Right.
So it's literally words in your head. That's the
Mm-hmm.
chatter.
Mm-hmm.
Mindless activity. So, we're sitting here staring off in space, or we're on, X scrolling through the feed, or, whatever.
Mm-hmm. When you're tuning out, kind of.
In other words, undisciplined, unproductive, and uncontrolled mental activity.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I have a concern about describing it this way, but this is kind of the way that I understand from the Eastern tradition they would describe the monkey mind. I think it's much more
Mm-hmm.
diabolical than this, but that's how they would
Diabolical.
describe it.
Interesting. I mean,
Well,
to
yeah, but
me, it seems like it's all the limbic system.
we're going to go in a slight. I was going to go there.
Mm-hmm.
It's obviously not all the limbic system. If it's just chatter and mindless activity and restlessness, that's not coming from the limbic system, though. That's when it's emotional, it's coming from the limbic system.
Mm. Would it be default mode network, or is that
Excellent,
too tied?
excellent. That's
Yeah.
exactly where it's coming from, and
Okay. And
that's
I guess
that's the
I
fork in the road that I took.
Oh, okay. So I guess I thought the limbic system and the default mode network were more connected, maybe? Maybe we
Well,
could
they
tease
are,
that out
but
if.
think about this. Let's say I'm gonna, and you know what? This bothers me because when I take my shirts to the cleaner, sometimes they put them on hangers, and I get these little points. And
Oh, bumps.
it
Come
drives
on,
me nuts.
guys.
I
It's
mean,
your job.
I'm styling it. I can't have that stuff.
I
Anyway,
know, Mark. They can't hold you down.
so let's say you invite me over for dinner.
Okay.
And on the way to dinner, I'm thinking, okay, I got to take a left on Elm Street and a right on Main Street and a right on Oak Street. And then I think, oh, and when I get there, she'll see these little spiky things on my shirt and she'll think I'm a geek.
Yeah, I'll tell you. Why don't you have dinner somewhere else?
And so in the beginning, I'm using my internal dialogue to reinforce my memory,
Uh-huh.
but at the end of that, it's completely coming from my limbic system because I'm afraid I'm going to be rejected and
Okay.
judged.
Okay, so it's one and then the other, or both.
In the same stream of thought, yeah.
Wow, that's fast. Boom.
So, all right. So now the solutions from a Buddhist point of view, and I'm going to get hate for this, but I'm going to say it anyway. So meditation practice, mindfulness, and then they would say studying the tendencies of the monkey mind to increase self-awareness.
Mm-hmm.
And I see my dash needs another space. Anyway, so now I'm just going to say this. In all my adult life working with people, and I've worked with close to 5,000 people, I've never had anybody break through into awakening using meditation or mindfulness. I think they're
Okay.
very beneficial. I think they're very beneficial.
Yeah.
And I've never had anybody have a breakthrough because they were studying the tendencies of their monkey mind.
Mm-hmm.
Because my experience is, unless you're awakened, you can't study the tendencies of the monkey mind. But I'm sure there are people listening that have a different experience, and I respect that. I think meditation is great. Mindfulness is fantastic. I just don't think that it typically leads to the breakthrough that people are looking for.
Right. You're saying that they're good, but it doesn't increase your ability to disidentify from your thought.
Oh my God, you're one step ahead of me here, Christine. I can't believe it. You're in the pocket.
Well, maybe I'm confusing everybody else. So the
Well, we'll see. No, you're
disidentifying.
not, because that's the
Okay,
direct.
good.
That's exactly. But we're going to back up a second
Okay.
because modern neuroscience has a perspective on this, and when you look into neuroscience, you'll see that recent neuroscience research has linked the concept of the monkey mind to brain regions known as the default mode network.
Boom.
Yeah, you were way ahead of us here.
Cool.
And now when they use the word recent, that's a big deal because this has been only in the last 10 or 12 years.
Oh,
So
real
they
cutting.
didn't even know about the default mode network. And let me tell you how they
Wow.
study this. What they do is they put you in a functional MRI, an fMRI, and what they do is they start subtracting signals. And so they would put somebody in a functional MRI and they would take the MRI and then they would do it again and they would give them a task.
Okay.
And then they would subtract one signal from the other and they could see what network was doing the task.
Oh, that's so clever.
And so what they
Wow.
found was that when a person was at rest and they subtracted the background noise, this network popped up called the default mode network. And studies have shown, and they were flabbergasted. It's like, why is this activity taking place?
Right.
Well, it turns out when we're at rest, this network in the brain turns on, and we start having all this
Mm-hmm.
activity. And I'm going to describe it in a second.
Mm-hmm.
So studies have shown that mindfulness meditation can help calm the default mode network, which is absolutely true. potentially reducing stress and improving overall brain function. So there are absolute benefits to mindfulness and meditation practices, and it does calm down the default mode network. Okay, well, what's the default mode network? The default mode network is the part of the brain that turns on when we're idle, when we're not doing a task. So if you want to get deeper into this, in our channel we have a lot of videos that talk about the default mode network and these concepts. And we would invite you to like and subscribe and take a look at some of the other videos, because what we're doing today is just kind of looking at a different viewpoint than we ever have before through the lens of the monkey mind. And
Cool.
I'm hoping that people are attracted to the video because they want to know about the monkey mind, and it falls into this bucket that we've been talking about over and over again.
Yeah.
Where we're captive to these networks in our brain, and we don't really know that we're captive.
Right. It's
So
like
let's go back
we're
here for a
asleep.
second. So the default mode network, and this is what the default mode network does, and this is why it's so destructive. What we do with the default mode network is we think about ourselves. Usually not in a good way. The default mode network helps us construct an internal narrative. And along with that, and this is absolutely critical to understand, as the default mode network constructs this narrative, a sense of self emerges that is part of the story. So when you think about this, you'll realize this is really true. When you're involved in an activity.
Sorry, my dog is playing with a bucket.
Okay, well, she's trying to participate.
Anyway, I'm sorry.
Well, Sunny heard me say bucket. Now she's playing with the bucket.
That's what she's so good. Such a good girl.
She's been trained.
Okay, so your sense of self comes out naturally as part of the default mode network getting
Right.
turned on. I might have to grab that.
Well, that's
Really
okay.
loud. Okay.
No, it's fine. So think about this for a second. When you're fully immersed in a task, you are not experiencing a sense of self.
Right. Right.
So like when you're playing golf or you're knitting or you're writing, a letter or, whatever, you're immersed in the task.
Yeah.
And there's no sense of agency.
Right.
In other words, there's
That's
no
when
feeling
you're truly in the moment.
that
Your whole world is the task you're doing or whatever, right?
that is correct. Now,
Yeah, and that's presence.
when you set that aside, the sense of self that was doing something emerges. And that is part of the default mode network.
Okay.
So the default mode network is also about thinking about the future and the remembered past. Now, what does that imply? What it implies is when the default mode network is activated, you're not present.
Yeah, I was going to say all of these are not being present.
That's correct. That's
Yeah.
correct. Also, a function of the DNM is thinking about what others are thinking. We're the only creatures on Earth that can actually think about what we think other people are thinking. And it's usually something like, "Oh, she won't like my shirt," or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Another way of
Okay.
thinking about it is mind wandering or rumination. Now, in my mind, this means one thing, and one thing only. That the voice in your head that sounds like you talking to you is being generated by the default mode network. Now, getting back to your original point, when it's emotional, it is being prompted by the limbic system. which is the emotional brain. The limbic system is fight or
Okay.
flight, anger, fear. It's a part of the brain we share with other animals, so it's all about survival.
Survival, yeah.
And basically, I've come to think of it just recently because I've been doing a little more research. The limbic system is basically an emotional processing pain machine.
Mm-hmm. Which is
And
why I call
unfortunately,
it a cruel master.
right.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's what the default mode network does, which is not good.
Right.
It
But I
takes,
have a feeling you're not just going to leave us in our problem.
no, I'm going to give you a better solution. But there's another solution I want to talk about first, which is also a good solution. But here is the default mode network.
Mm-hmm.
That actually is what it, if we could see inside the brain and all the electrical connections, but you can
Wow.
see that the front of the brain is just really heavily involved in the default mode network.
Yeah, it is. That's a really cool picture.
It is. Yeah, they're getting
Wow.
imagery of stuff that's, kind of unbelievable.
Yeah. Good job, science. We're proud of you.
All right. So, next step here. I'm missing something. Let me see. Yeah, I'm missing something. I'm going to show it to you.
Okay.
Okay. So here's another thing. Oh, and let me turn on your camera.
Where did I
Sorry,
go?
you're
It's
gone,
because I
but you're back.
wasn't practicing presence.
But you're back. So
Bless you.
another thing that turns off the default mode network is psychedelics,
That makes a lot of sense.
and the specific ones that are being researched right now are psilocybin from magic mushrooms, MDMA, better known as ecstasy or Molly. And a big one coming on strong is ketamine. And ketamine is not actually a psychedelic in the traditional sense.
All right.
It is an anesthetic.
Right. Right. It's like a horse tranquilizer, right?
Yeah, something like that. But the thing that people need to understand about why this is so important, because these in turning off the default mode network, it turns off all that rumination, and basically, if we go back to this, we are turning off the ego mind. So all of these
Uh-huh.
things. Wait a minute. There we go. All of these things that it does here. This is basically what, in modern terms, we might call the ego.
Yeah. Yeah,
Not in
sure.
the Freudian sense, but in in the New
Like
Age
young.
kind of thinking
Uh-huh.
sense.
Uh-huh.
So all of these functions of the default mode network, along with the sense of self, are the false self or the ego mind.
Mm-hmm.
So back to psychedelics.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in typical fashion, we banned these for a whole bunch of years, and we missed about 20 or 30 years of opportunity to help people.
Mm-hmm.
But the psychedelics are being used quite successfully to treat
Right.
post-traumatic stress disorder for veterans of war,
Mm-hmm.
people who've been through complete trauma.
Mm-hmm. Depression too.
Ketamine has been used for depression very successfully.
Yeah.
And now these things are being, somewhat legalized, and they're being studied pretty dramatically.
Right. Yeah, I've seen a ton of studies and seeing it get decriminalized in certain places, even though it's
R-
not
right.
like touted. Yeah.
I mean, if you go back now, this is probably before a lot of people's time who are listening to this, but back in the 80s, I believe Peter Jennings did a documentary on MDMA.
Oh.
And if you go back and watch that documentary, you can see, I mean, they had women on there who had been assaulted and raped, and were suffering, and they took one
Yeah.
dose of MDMA and it all went away.
Yeah. I have a
And so,
theory about that.
what's your theory? Go ahead.
Well, like I see it in craniosacral work or other energy work types, and it's like when you get into this certain trance, I think your default mode network must turn off, and it allows that kind of like deeper sense of self that that is like trying to guide you. It allows it to
Hmm.
have a voice, and then you can like hear but also feel how right it is to
Mm.
have that experience without the presence of whatever was holding you back.
On the flip side of that, I also think what happens is, when you're under the influence of the psychedelics, you're free of the ego mind in the sense that you're able to step away and you're able to see what the ego mind does to you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And part of what
And it
it
makes
does
you
is,
feel really safe
yeah,
because it like mimics serotonin in, how do you say that, in chemical structure? Is that how you say that?
not sure.
It's like the little pictures you see with the hexagons and lines that show you what the structure is of the chemical.
Well, I know psilocybin, for instance, goes into a certain receptor, but I'm not an expert on all that.
Yeah,
But
it's okay. Yeah,
but you remember when you had your awakening experience, it was as if you stepped back and saw all the bullshit that was going on.
right. Yeah,
Many people have that same experience when they're on psychedelics.
right. Yeah.
So it can be very effective in turning off the default mode network and very therapeutic.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so now let me present one more way of tackling this monkey mind problem, and I think by far the most effective.
Mm-hmm. I'm ready. I think I know. Yep.
And disidentification, what does this mean? It means learning to become the witness of simple thoughts. And I'll teach you the exercise here in a second. But what you learn is by doing this exercise is you quickly learn the voice in your head that sounds like you talking to you is not you.
Mm-hmm.
There,
And I like that you use the word witness because usually a witness is not involved with a crime. They just see it.
that's right.
And it's like you aren't the one making your default mode network have lots of thoughts. It just does it and you're witnessing it.
That's right. That's
Yeah.
right. And so
Yeah.
everybody can kind of do this exercise along with us today who's listening. So just
Hmm.
sit there and relax and wait for the next random, trivial, everyday thought. And when the first thought comes along, just notice that you're thinking. Don't pay any attention to the content of the thought. All you're doing is witnessing the fact that a thought is occurring. Okay, now what happens when you do that? Hopefully those of you participating had noticed that the instant you realized you were thinking, it went away.
Right.
Okay, now what is that? So when you pay attention to a thought, it turns off the default mode network and the voice in your head goes silent.
Right. Because the task of thought watching shuts off the default mode network.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Excellent. And
Yeah.
so if you do that repeatedly, just do it 2 or 3 times a day over the course of a week or two, there's a light bulb moment that happens where you suddenly realize as that voice starts to speak, it's not you. And that at that point, there is an awakening and you disidentify from the voice in your head,
Hmm.
which means now you're the master of the default mode network, not the slave anymore.
Yeah.
Now I'm going to link, we had a video we did a couple months ago about Eckhart Tolle's awakening. And it was extremely popular. I think it's got about 4,100 views.
Mm.
Where Christina and I go detail into Tolle's awakening and how it applies to this thought watching exercise that we're doing. And I would
Right.
strongly encourage you, when we get to the end of this video, just click on the end card and watch that video. because it will really take you through this exercise.
Yeah, right. And what not to do, because it's really honestly so easy to just get in the way of it working by like making it more complicated.
Right. And remember
So
what I said a minute ago
spare
is
yourself.
do this exercise on trivial everyday thoughts. Why do we want
Yeah.
to do that? Because what we're trying to do
Well,
is separate ourselves from the thoughts. Go ahead, I interrupted you.
oh, that's okay. I was just gonna say that when your limbic system gets more involved, it's a lot harder to separate
Right.
two. And so by keeping it really simple, like thoughts like, what if I don't have a thought? Or I need to brush my hair, or I'm almost out of
Right.
gas. Like those are the kind of thoughts. And then all you have to do is acknowledge them, and you have to, if you're wanting to make it more complicated, stop yourself. It's not more
E-
complicated, and it might add weeks to your awakening.
That's correct. It's very
Yeah.
important that you don't use this exercise to try to solve a problem.
Mm-hmm.
It's an abstract exercise where you learn to become the observer of your own mental activity.
Yeah. But I will also add too, for people who are going to try it or are already in the process of thought watching, that after you have an awakening and maybe even an enlightenment, there's going to be times where you have an emotional thought and you can go, "This is just a thought." And
Right.
so the skill does come, but only if you baby yourself and work your way up through just everyday thoughts, in my experience.
Well, there's too much of an entanglement with negative or emotional thoughts
Yeah.
for the disidentification to fully take place.
Okay, that makes sense.
The thought will go away if you do it on a negative thought, but the transformation never happens on big negative thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
It only happens if you practice on the trivial thought. What's a trivial thought? It's a comment in your head like, I don't like the taste of this toothpaste.
Mm-hmm.
And you're right. What you said a minute ago is it's spooky because this is what I use in my practice of psychotherapy. I teach people this thought watching, and a lot of times they're struggling with it. And I'll say to them, Do you know what the first thought was?" And they're like, "No, I can't find it." And I'll say, "Your first thought was, where's the first thought?
Mm-hmm. What
Or
if
what
I
if I
don't
don't
have
have
a
a
thought?
thought?"
Yeah.
So the point is that people, are thinking all the time. They don't even realize they're thinking.
Yeah, right.
They have no conscious awareness that there is a voice speaking words in their head. And when they realize it's happening, all of a sudden they wake up.
Mm-hmm.
It's huge, and then they become the master of the monkey mind because when that voice speaks, they no longer care anymore.
Right. Yeah. You'd be like, bye, Felicia.
So where are we here? Yeah, disidentification. So that the disidentification is a bigger, more. I believe it's more effective than psychedelics because I've had people who've had really great experiences with psychedelics, but when I
Yeah.
taught them the thought watching, they still had an awakening experience.
Yeah, that I can agree with that. I feel like psychedelics have given me types of awakenings, and so has craniosacral or like other energy practices, but not in the same way that disidentification did.
Right.
It was a lot more with those other things. It was like, oh, we'll just see whatever floats up. And with this, it was very cut and clear. Like, this is the box that, or whatever, the contents of this box are the things that are going to change with thought watching. And it was all limbic system and mind chatter, and then realizing that I can choose my beliefs.
Yeah. Actually, I we did a an episode on Christina's awakening, and I will put that also as an end card.
Mm.
So if you'd like to go watch that, that will be attached to this. If you
Yeah.
like
And that
this
was
kind of
almost a
content,
year ago.
that was last December.
I know, it's almost a year ago. Like,
Yeah.
so much growth has happened since after the thought disidentification. It's
I'll
amazing.
never forget the morning I got, it was a Sunday morning, you sent me a text. I think I had the awakening.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
You know,
the way you described it was great.
yeah. I don't think this term or this phrase works 100% of the time, but I do think it does work in a lot of cases, and that is life gets as good as you let it. And
Oh,
sometimes I wonder how much I'm just clinging on to my problems, preventing my life from getting better, and
right.
it's just becoming conscious, and the awakening really helps with that.
The thing I like to say is life is perfect unless you think about it.
Yeah.
So we hope you like and subscribe. But Christina and I have been talking, and we are thinking about creating an online community called Thought Masters.
Hmm. Hmm.
And this is for those of you who have been listening to our channel and want to experience the awakening. This will be a community of people who understand that and who are working on that,
Mm.
and how that applies to depression, anxiety, and specifically relationship problems, where we'll be discussing the dance of the lion and unicorn. It also applies, and I've had a lot of experiences with this. People will come to me and they will have the awakening, but then
Yeah.
they want somewhere to go with it so they don't forget what happened to them.
Oh, heck yeah. It's so easy to fall back asleep if you let
Right.
yourself, or if you have a stressful season. It's so easy.
And then there's a whole bunch of people who've had their lives completely changed by this and they want to help others. So those three groups are going to be in this online community called Thought Masters. And we're
Yeah.
going to be doing a founders launch here in the next few weeks. And if you're interested in becoming a founder or finding out more about this online community, scan this QR code. And at the bottom of the first page of the form is a box you can check that indicates to us you're interested in the online community and the founders. There's no obligation. You're just going to be on the mailing list. That's all, the email list.
Mm. Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I'm excited. I gotta say, I'm excited for the site too, because like even just in your and my personal conversations, in the podcast, but also outside of recording time, I feel like our conversations have become so much more intelligent and posed really good questions for both of us. And I just think it's going to be really cool when we have like lots of people taking this
mm-hmm,
conversation further with all these different points of view, all these different questions. Like I
right.
think you and I and anyone involved is going to have a chance to really go as deep as there might be, like as might be available in the world. Like I don't know. But
One
it's
thing,
cool.
a comment that I'm sorry, I had a cold and I've got a bit of a cough still. One thing that I hear consistently from people, and I mean this sincerely, is the fact that you and I are doing this together. When they hear your point of view, and when they hear Christina, you explain from your point of view what's happening and ask questions
Mm,
and give feedback, the fact that there's another person here that's that's integrating their experience
right,
seems to
right.
bring a richness to the listeners of these videos. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that's going to be just enhanced, 10 or 100x in the online community, because they're going to get all these
Oh, it's
different point of
gotta be.
views.
Well, and like, thank you for everyone who's ever written comments, whether they were positive or negative about our videos. I think it has really helped Mark and I take those conversations to the next level anyway. And so I feel like it's just going to be a forum of that potential, you know.
Sure.
We're all going to get better from it. It's so cool.
By the way, I've written a bunch of books. The one in the middle, Mastering Thought, is the one that relates to today's video. It's a breakdown of the voice in your head. And again, here's the QR code if you want to contact us, and we will respond very quickly. Any inquiries?
Yeah. Love it.
What
Always a
what
pleasure,
else am I
Mark.
missing here, Christina?
Well, we have a thought watching webinar coming up in
Oh,
a couple
couple weeks.
weeks. And you can also scan the QR code to sign up for that. And it's about an hour, and then Mark and I will kind of just get a feel where everyone's at, who's there, and we'll make sure that whoever knows the least can catch up with everyone else, and then we'll have time for Q&A and talking about thought watching and what part of your journey you're on, and make a space for time for people who have had their awakening to like shout it from the mountains, because honestly, like if you haven't had an awakening and someone tells you about it, you're like, oh, okay, cool, that sounds cool. But when you've had it, you're like, everything is different now. And it's so nice to be with other people who get it because, like even if you have a great thought watching experience, it might be that none of your family or friends are interested, and it can feel very alone, and it's very easy to fall back asleep.
Okay.
So I don't know. I just think that's another great thing about finding a community who's working on the same stuff as you are right now.
Awesome.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. All right. So until we meet again.
All right. Sayonara. Thank you, everyone. And if you have any questions or comments, please put them down below. We love it when you do that.
Oh, one other thing. If you're uncomfortable with QR codes, there'll be an email address in the comments. You can contact us. All righty.
Cool.
Bye-bye for now.
See ya.